Rabbi will say, let's begin. So on a serious note, I'll give all the thank yous a little bit later on, but what a schos, what a beautiful Ma'ariv, B'mincha Ma'ariv we had on the water, Baruch Hashem, and like I said, there are a number of people that I'm going to thank later on for making this beautiful siyum come together. But it is such a schos, Baruch Hashem, to be able to misayim this mesechta together with everyone. So Rabbi say, let us begin. We'll have more to say in Yirtzeh Hashem a little bit later on. And welcome to all of those who are joining us on Zoom, and welcome to all of those who are joining us on YouTube. It's a schos, Baruch Hashem, to be able to learn with those in person and those virtually. So Rabbi say, we find ourselves, and the good news is, we're actually going to finish Bava Kamma tonight. So this actually is. I'm not going to give any homework. I'm not going to leave anything till tomorrow. This is not going to be a makeup shear. This is it. This is it. So we find ourselves. I'm sorry. Bli neder, right? So we find ourselves on Daf Kuf Yotes Amud Beis 119b, and we are picking up. I believe we left off Tan Rabbanon? Yeah. Good. Tan Rabbanon. So we'll say, so Kuf Yotes 119b, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 11 lines down from the top. Tan Rabbanon. In Lochin Nasir. So let's remember again, just to reorient ourselves a little bit, although we just learned this morning, but just to reorient ourselves a little bit. So remember again, the Mishnah was discussing the fascinating concept that if a craftsman does work with particular materials, what is he permitted to keep? Like in other words, there's always, whether it's somebody who combs the wool, someone who launders the wool, very often there is surplus that comes out. So what is the craftsman permitted to keep versus what is he obligated to go ahead and give back to the balabos? So Mar says, so you can't take, we'll say the sorik is the comber, the one who combs the wool. You can't go ahead and take from him woolen tufts, because those tufts of wool really belong to the balabayis and not to the sorik. I will say, of course, the one great caveat in this entire sugya is really this whole thing is based on minhag hamakom, right? All of this is really based on whatever local common practice is. So the Mishnah is kind of espousing things in a vacuum, but at the end of the day, if the minhag hamakom is that the craftsman could keep this, the balabayis could keep this, then of course all of that governs. So generally, you're not allowed to purchase tufts of wool from the wool comber because it generally belongs to the balabayis. However, again, halach l'maiso makom shenagu lio shelo lochin or b'chol makom lochin mehen kar malei muchin ukeses malei muchin. So we'll say, interestingly enough, but wherever you live, you are allowed to go ahead and purchase from the wool comber, the guy who combs the wool. You're allowed to go ahead and purchase from him a pillow or a mattress filled with wool. What's the reason? My taima kaninu b'shinui, because this is actually very interesting. We've seen this many times. That halacha l'maisa, even if it turns out that he did go ahead and steal it, nevertheless, the ganav has been kona the item with a shino. We've seen this already before. This concept that when a person steals something, so gzela by itself may or may not affect kinyan, but certainly shinoi, changing the item, definitely affects the kinyan. So even for argument's sake, if the wool comber, let's say he is a ganav, but the act of taking the wool that he combed, the excess wool, transforming it into a pillow or into a mattress is a shinui, is a change, and he acquires the object through that change. Let's go back there. Ein lochin megardi, so we'll say now a weaver. Guy's a weaver. What can you purchase from the weaver? What can't you purchase from the weaver? So, in lochin megardi, you can't purchase from the weaver. Lo irin velo nidin velo punkalin. So we'll say a literal translation is woolen stoppers, heddles, or bobbins. These are all different parts, ultimately, again, of the loom, and different things that you go ahead and you create from wool. Velo shiripikios. You also can't go ahead and purchase from him any leftover from the spools of thread. Avalochin mehen beged menumer. What you can, is very interesting. What can you purchase from the weaver? A spotted garment. Rashi points out, what's the pshat for the spotted garment? This is incredible. What's a spotted garment? A spotted garment is a garment that is made from a number of different leftover patches of wool. So the chap is, even if he stole it, he went ahead and he acquired it ultimately again through a shinui. Incredible. Let's go back there. Erev v'shasi tavi v'arig. So you could also purchase from him, again, something that's the warp and the woof, spun and woven. Amri tavi shakli arug mibai. So if you can go ahead and take something that was spun, certainly you could take something that was woven, you could purchase from him. So the Gemara says, my arig, what does it mean? Arig, tichi. Rashi says, what's tichi? Both say Rashi's on both sides of the page over here. So Rashi says, tichi sharsharos. These are literally rings that are made out of wool. So you'd be able to purchase that from him as well. So So we'll say if a person is a dyer, so you can't go ahead and purchase from the dyer. Lo osos, thank you very much, thank you. Lo osos velo dugmos. No, don't look up from your Gemaras. Don't look up. Keep your eyes on the Gemara. Come on, Chavra. This is mamish t'nisayna olam hazeh. So the Gemara says as follows. So you can't go ahead. So you can't. If someone is a dyer, right? D-Y-E-R. So if someone is a dyer, you can't purchase from him la'osos, samples. Osos are like sample patches. Velo dugmos. Dugmos also, Rashi points out over here, osos, I'm sorry. We'll say generally when you would go ahead and bring something to the dyer to dye, so often what would happen is before you would go ahead and commit to something, you would give him like a little, I don't know what the technical term is, but like a little piece of thread to see how the dye took to the, what is it? A sample. No, but isn't it like a technical, like a swatch? Swatch. Okay, good. Or a sample, right? So the idea over here is also, so again, you can't purchase from the tzava. You can't purchase the so the osos, like the little pieces of thread to see how or the little pieces of wool to see how the dye took. Velo dugmos, samples. Velo telushim shel tzemer, or pieces removed from the entire wool. Avalochim mehen beget tzavo. What can you purchase? You can purchase a dyed garment. We'll say once again, because even if it's stolen, technically speaking, the thief acquires it with the shinui. Tavi begadim. So we'll say ultimately, if you have garments made of spun thread, if you could take something made out of spun thread, then it goes without saying that of course you could purchase the garment itself. So the Gemara says, "My begadim, what's begadim? Namti, something made out of felt." Okay, Tanabanon hanosin oros laabdon. So the Gemara says, let's say a person goes ahead. Person gives hides to a tanner to go ahead and tan the hide. So what's the halacha? So Gemara says hakitzun v'hatalushin hare elu shalo. So Rashi points out over here, what are kitzun and talushin? Rashi says kitzun shemekatzeh mina or saviv. Those are the little like threads of leather that you go ahead and you cut off the hides. That's the kitzun. And talushin, Rashi points out, is the wool that comes separated off the hide itself. So kitzun v'hatalushin hare elu shabalabayis. Those belong to the balabayis. But any wool that comes out when washing the hide itself, ultimately those belong to the craftsman. Fine. So the Mishnah said that if halacha l'maisa there were, let's say, black threads on the woolen garment, on the white garment, you could take all the black threads for yourself. The merchant, the worker, could take all the black threads. Amar Yehuda, kitzra shmei. We'll say the person who goes ahead and evens out the garment, he's called the kitzra. Rashi says over kitzra shmei hakobes. A launderer was also called the kitzra. So the Gemara says the kitzra shakele. So the Gemara says, why is he called the kitzra? Because he goes ahead and he takes for himself all of the different extending threads. Amar Yehuda hakol ola leminyan tcheles. So this is actually interesting halacha, which we're not going to get very much into tonight. But the concept is that the Rashi quotes the Gemara Maseches Menachos that tzitzis itself has to be distanced from the edge of the garment a certain amount. The threads that hang off the edge of the garment are taken into account with that particular measurement. Amar Yehuda hakol leminyan tcheles v'Yitzchak beri. Yitzchak, my son, kaped iluya, is very makbid on this. He's very makbid on this. Okay. So we'll say, so remember again, the Mishnah said that if the tailor leaves behind the thread, so the Kamma litfar. So we'll say, so remember again, the halacha was if he leaves behind enough thread to go ahead and sew the garment. So the Gemara says as follows. So the Gemara says, Amravasi, malay machat chutz lamachat. So the Gemara said over here that halacha l'maisa, how much does he go ahead and have to, or how much does he leave over? He leaves over a needle's worth chutz lamachat, and an additional amount that extends past the end of the needle. So the Gemara says, Ibailu, Kash on the shear. So Mali Mechat v'chutz lamechat kamali mechat, al dilma Mali Mechat v'chutz lamechat mashu. So we'll say when we speak about this additional amount that it leaves over, how much is it? Is it a needle's length of thread plus an additional needle's length of thread, or just a small amount of additional thread? All right, so Tashma, the Sanya Chayet Sheshira Sachut, Pachot Mikadei Litforbo. So we'll say, so the Gemara calls the Braisa that if the tailor left over thread, pachos mikadei litvar bo, less than enough to be able to use for any type of meaningful type of sewing, or for that matter, a piece of thread that was less than 3 by 3 finger breadths. So bisman shabalabais makbid alein ar elu shabalabais. When the balabais is makbid, so the balabais gets it back. Ein balabais makbid alein. What happens if the balabais is not makbid on it? Then hare elu shalo. Then ultimately, again, they belong to the tailor. So the Gemara says, let's analyze this. So I'll say, if you hold that Allah we're talking about an amount of thread, right? That is the amount of thread, the size of the needle, plus an additional amount. The size, in other words, the additional amount is also the additional amount. In other words, both sides. The excess thread is the thread that goes in the needle plus an additional needle's length of thread. So pachas mikan. So even if it's a little bit less than this, chazi l'sichsa. Then I both say it is still ra'i, it's still usable. Ultimately, to go ahead and stitch a loop. But I will say, if all it is just the needle's length of thread and just a little bit of an additional amount of thread, then what is that additional amount that you're good? Then what is that additional amount of thread usable for? Then what is it usable for? The Gemara says, so we'll say, what do you see from here? You see from here that halacha l'maisa, when the Mishnah talks about the amount of excess thread, it's the thread the size of a needle plus an additional needle's length of thread. Good. And let's say, last piece in Maseches Bava Kamma. So Rabbi say, let's go. Here we go. Mashachar. So we'll say, remember again, the last part of the Mishnah was what a carpenter. What does a carpenter get to keep versus what does the carpenter have to give to the balabais? The Gemara says as follows. Or minu. Mashachar shmotzi b'matzad v'nifsak b'megira hare elu shabalabais. So the Brisa says as follows: that which the carpenter goes ahead and creates with the A's. We spoke about this before. A-D-Z-E. We saw this morning. The A's. That which he goes ahead and creates with the A's, v'anifsak b'megira, or that which he goes and creates with the megira. We'll see what that means in just a moment. Hare elu shabalabais. These all belong to the balabais. I will say, just the way to understand this is as follows. Essentially with the carpenter, here's what it comes down to. When the carpenter is working with wood, if he creates larger wood chips, then ultimately, again, those are going to belong to the balabais. Smaller wood chips or shavings, bepashtos, those are going to belong to the carpenter himself. Hayotzi mitachas mekadeach umitachas ritani. So any wood chips or anything that comes out from under a drill or from under a plane, Vanigra b'megira, that which comes from a saw, hare elu shalo, these belong to the carpenter. So I will say, so this contradicts the Mishnah. Amarava, it's not a contradiction. Ba'asra detana didan, iketarti chatzini. So I will say, according to the author of our Mishnah, there are really two different types of instruments that were used ultimately again to saw wood. L'rabasi karle kshil, the larger instrument they called an axe, u'lezutrasi karle matzad, and the smaller instrument they called what we call, an aze. Ba'asra de Tana bara, but in the place of the Tana of the Braisa, chatu, there was really only one kind of chopping, or we'll call it chopping carpentry instrument, dika v'karli matzad. Okay, so essentially both the Gemara answers, the Braisa and the Mishnah talk about the usage of two different types of instruments. All right, both say, this is really the last part of Bava Kamma. This is it. Here we go. Both say, it's actually, we're going to see, David Schwartz said to me today, this is how we're ending Bava Kamma. I don't know, it's a 119-day journey, and it's like a lot of technicalities. What can you keep? What can't you keep? Watch this. And so the Mishnah said, remember, the Mishnah said, well, say, in all of these cases, what the craftsman, right, the bottom line of the sugya is, the shaila is, what could the craftsman keep versus what does the craftsman have to give back to the balabais? So I will say, so a lot of this has to do with just minhag hamakom, whatever the common practice was. But bottom line, the Mishnah says, is if the craftsman is working in front of the balabais, then what? Everything belongs to the balabais. Everything belongs to the balabais. So watch this. The Gemara says, Tana Abanon, Misasasei Avanim, Ein Ba Mishum Gezer. What's this? Fascinating. Wood stone cutters or stone shavers, quite literally. Stone cutters. The shavings of stone cutting, there's no gezel. There's no theft, which means what? Who gets to keep the shavings? The craftsman. We'll say, watch this. Yet, mefaske ilanos, mefaske gifanim, menakfi higi. We have to both say, again, what we call the shavings. It's not really the shavings, like the trimmings. You're trimming trees, you're pruning bushes. you're pruning vines, right? Or menachshe zuraim, or you go ahead and you pull out weeds from vegetables. V'odre yirakos, or you go ahead and you pull out the weeds by vegetable. Or there's also weeding vegetables. So we'll say, watch this. Bizman shabalabais makbid aleim yeshum shem gezel. If the balabais wants them back, then ultimately again there is gezel. Then there is theft. Ein balabais makbid aleim. However, you could come in. It's okay. Ein balabais makbid aleim. But if the balabais, thank you so much. But if the balabais is not makbid on them, the balabais is not makbid on them, then hare elu shalo. Then ultimately, again, you could keep all of these different trimmings, all of these different weeds. So Rabbi Yehuda says as follows: Kashos v'chazis ein ba mishum gezel. So Rabbi Yehuda says kashos are hops, chazis is green grain, type of inferior grain. There's no gezel. Ba'asra dekap yeshem gezel. But if you live in a place where the owners are makbid on these items, then ultimately, again, there is gezel. So the Gemara says, Amravina or masa mechasya asra dekaptihu. So Ravina says Masa Machase is an example ultimately of a place where people are makbid even on small things like hops or things like green grain. I will say, look how the Masechta ends. And Chaver, listen, I know the meatballs are very entertaining, but I just want to tell you, but Lamaisa, listen to this incredible distinction. It's interesting to see that the Mishnah says that everyone agrees that the stone cutter is permitted to keep the shavings of his stones, right? Isn't that fascinating? There's no machlokas over there. Stone cutter could always keep the shavings of his stone. Yet what? Yet, if you go ahead and you trim your trees, you prune your trees, you go ahead and you weed your vegetables, that already, again, the balabais may be makbid. Both say it sounds totally counterintuitive, right? I would think that the truth is stone shavings are so much more meaningful than weeding or leftover vines or leftover. So we'll say, what's the pshat? What's the difference? It's very simple. The difference is like this. They will say, what can you do with stone shavings? What can you do with stone shavings? The answer is nothing. Right? You could keep them, you could make them. I don't know what you could do with it, but Lamaisa, here's what I would tell you is, with stone shavings, you can't create anything else. With pruning from a vine, from a tree, with gardening, I will say, what can you use that for? What can you use that for? You could compost. I don't mean to ruin anyone's appetite, although I'm not ruining anyone's appetite, right? So you could compost. So I will say, you take those things, and you could utilize them to go ahead and cause other things to grow. So I will say, what the Gemara is saying is like this. The balabayis, whatever Baal Shem Tov says, whenever you see balabayis in the Gemara, the balabayis is always merames. It's always a metaphor to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So what is the Ribono Shalom makbid on? The Ribono Shalom is makbid on shavings when they could go ahead and produce additional life, where they could produce additional growth. If the shavings are just shavings and they're not going to facilitate any more growth, Kadosh Baruch Hu says, I don't care about that. That doesn't matter. The only type of shavings in life that have any level of meaning are the things that could engender growth in something else. And I both say, what it comes down to in life is a person has to ask themselves, are you a stone? Am I a stone? Or ultimately, again, am I a tree, a vine, or a vegetable? The shavings, the things that come off me, do they facilitate growth in those around me? Or a stone is very beautiful. And a stone is incredible because what does a stone do? With a stone, you could create an incredible life. So I'll tell you, we got some of the samples for the stone for our new building. Beautiful. With stone, we need a donor. But with stone, right? With stone, you could create a beautiful edifice. But stone doesn't create additional growth. Stone is what it is. It's beautiful, it's fantastic, but it's never going to create new life. Stone shavings, you can make something beautiful, but it will never create something new. But you take the trimmings of a tree, the trimmings of a bush, the trimmings of the hedges, you weed the vegetables, and suddenly those things which the Welt says are so irrelevant and so valueless, yet you put them back into the ground, and they can engender so much growth. I will say, life is not just about what you do for yourself, but life is also about your shavings. What comes off you? What is it that you're giving out to the world around you? Are you just a beautiful stone? And you look beautiful, your edifice is fantastic, but you're not facilitating growth in anything or anyone around you? Or are you a tree, a vine, a bush, a vegetable, where even the stuff that's harvested off facilitates growth all around me? So let's say that's how Gemara Maseches Bava Kamma ends. What do you want to be in life? You want to be a beautiful but inanimate object that engenders no growth in anything around you? Or do you want to be something maybe that doesn't sparkle as much? Maybe it's not as eye-catching, but it facilitates growth in anything and everything around you. The Balabayis doesn't care about stone shavings, because stone shavings don't do anything. But the Balabayis absolutely cares about the shavings, the organic shavings that engender growth. And I will say, the Balabayis HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants us more than anything, not simply to be beautiful stones, but he wants us to be beautiful trees, beautiful vegetables, beautiful bushes, beautiful vines, that we're beautiful in ourselves, but that which comes off us gives life as well. I will say, when we learn the daf, and those of us who Baruch Hashem have been learning the daf for a while know, the beauty of the daf is, the daf doesn't make you into a stone. The daf makes you into a tree. Because when you learn the daf, the shavings of your learning inspire your wife, inspire your children, inspire the home, inspire your chaverim. There are a lot of very nice things in life that you could do, and they make you into a beautiful stone. But the daf makes you into the kind of person where not only are you beautiful, not only are you holy, but you emote that holiness, you emote that goodness, and that which comes out from your learning engenders growth in everyone and everything around you. And I will say, it has been a tremendous zechus for the last 119 days. And I have to give a special hakaras to Rabbi Richter. Baruch Hashem is joining us for the Daf Yomi as well. He does such a beautiful and incredible job, Baruch Hashem, giving the Daf for us as well. And Rabbi Kamma Akiva Kovacs, who is not here with us tonight, who does a beautiful job as well, helping to move the shir forward. I will say, it has been an incredible journey, an incredible zechus over the last 119 days. And I think part of the beauty of a night like tonight, is we become trees for each other. On a night like this, each of us are luminescent, and each of us are shining so bright. And this, I will say, is a tremendous honor. There are people in this room that never thought they would ever finish a Masechta, right? There are people in this room who never thought they'd finish Shas, and there are people in this room who have finished Masechtas, but never thought they would ever like learning Torah again. We have a whole mix of people over here. I will say, we are trees for one another. That which comes off me inspires you, and that which comes off you inspires me. We're not stones. We're organic, growth-oriented materials. And the Balabayis doesn't care about stones. The Balabayis only cares about things that could engender growth for themselves and engender growth all around as well. We have grown together over the last 119 days. And I just want to point out, look, the world has changed so much in the last 140 plus days. Am Yisrael is at war, Eretz Yisrael is at war, and it's been overwhelming. I both say, yet you know what the incredible thing is? In life, when life is turbulent, the most important thing you need is an anchor. I both say, the daf is the anchor. For the chevra here that doesn't learn the daf, get your act together and start learning the daf. I would say everybody needs an anchor. Everybody needs a constant. Everybody needs something that roots themselves in a beautiful reality of holiness, because the world is so tumultuous and our circumstances are so tumultuous, and the daf keeps us grounded. The daf keeps the roots growing. The daf keeps the branches growing. The daf keeps the tree growing. And when we continue to grow, not only do we benefit as individuals, but Baruch Hashem, everyone around us gets to share in that growth with us. We should be Zochem Yirtz Hashem. That as we go ahead and we finish this beautiful inside, I just want to point out one other thing. I guarantee you that, I don't know how old this structure is. In the history of Baltimore, there has never been a siyum in this place. I can say that with almost absolute certainty. Rabbi Levi Yitzchak says, Rabbi Yitzchak B'disha says, that when you come and you make a siyum, you do a davar shebekdusha in a place where there was never a davar shebekdusha done, you go ahead and you're ma'ale nitzotzos. You raise up sparks of holiness. Because in every place in the world, there are always sparks. Those sparks are often obscured by klipos, by shells of impurity. And when Yidden, a group of holy Jews, come and do davar shebekdusha in the place where there was never kedusha before, they remove all of the klipos, remove all of the shells, and lift up all the nitzotzos. I will say, tonight, we've added more kedusha into the world. Because for the first time in the history of the Baltimore Rowing Club, right, there's a siyum, what? Baltimore and water, is that what it's called? right? Baltimore water. Okay, I don't know, whatever. It might be a shtick level, the Zara, but we'll leave that on the side. Don't look there. Don't look. So it's like in the history of this, I will say, there was never a mincha ma'ariv davened on that deck. It never happened before. There was never, again, I'm not a historian, I'm positive. There was never a mincha ma'ariv davened on that deck. We were zilcha to be ma'alav and itzoltzos on that deck. And there was never a simon a sechta in this place. I will say, that's what it means to be a tree. When you're a tree, the stuff that comes off you gives off kedusha as well. It's not just our own learning, but it's the extra kedusha that it brings us. So we should be zocha me'eretz Hashem, then the merit of this siyum. We should all continue, me'eretz Hashem, to be beautiful, strong trees, growing in our own ruchnius, growing in our own holiness, and at the same time, me'eretz Hashem, giving and adding holiness to all of those around us. We should be zocha me'eretz Hashem to lift up the sparks wherever we go. Our learning should be a schus for ourselves, for our mishpachos, for our community. But most importantly, during these difficult and overwhelming times, our learning should be a schus for each and every one of our precious soldiers who go out and are moser nefesh for Am Yisrael and Eretz Yisrael each and every day. Our learning should be a schus for the 134 hostages, our brothers and sisters, whose whereabouts are unknown, whose condition is unknown, and who we think about, and we daven for, and we learn for, and we pray for, and we cry for each and every day. They should feel the power of our learning. They should feel the power of our trees. HaKadosh Baruch Hu should see how come every day, it doesn't matter what's happening in the world. There's peace, there's not peace, there's war. It doesn't matter. We show up. I would say we show up. We show up. That's what the daf means. You're tired, you get up. You didn't sleep enough, you get up. You don't feel like it, you get up. It doesn't make a difference. It doesn't make a difference. There are no excuses. There's no out. The Ribono Shel Olam should see our unequivocal commitment to Him. And we should be Zocha Meretz Hashem to experience that reciprocal, unequivocal commitment from Him. And we should be Zocha Meretz Hashem say that our next Yom Bab Mitzvah, as beautiful as this venue is, shouldn't take place here, but Meretz Hashem should take place in a rebuilt Yerushalayim, with all of our hostages home, with all of our soldiers safely embedded with their families, with the rebuilt Beis HaMikdash, with the Malach HaMashiach Mihira B'Yameinu. Amen. Hadrun Allah, Hagoz Al Basra, Uslik Allah, Meseches Bava Kamma.